Chosen one, what if I told you that the people around you have no idea what you actually survived? They judged your smile, not realizing it was masking the storm beneath. They saw your calm demeanor and assumed you had no battles, no scars. But the truth is, you walked through fires they can't even imagine. What they mistook for silence was actually strength, divine strategy in disguise. The path you've walked isn't one that many would have survived. And yet, here you are, not just intact, but shining with a light that was forged in the darkest of places. If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your quiet survival is about to shake everything they thought they knew. The silent battle no one saw. They never knew what you endured. To the outside world, you looked like you had it all together, calm, composed, maybe even thriving. But inside, you were fighting battles that left no marks, no visible wounds. These weren't the kinds of struggles people talk about over coffee. They were private wars, silent storms that raged within. Every day, you carried the weight of things unseen. Doubts that gnawed at your confidence, betrayals that cut deeper than you let on, fears you couldn't put into words. And through it all, you kept going. No one knew the effort it took just to show up, to smile, to seem okay. You felt like you were walking a tightrope between who you appeared to be and the battles you faced when no one was watching. It was a kind of loneliness that went beyond being alone. It was the isolation of fighting a war no one else knew you were fighting. For a long time, you might have even doubted yourself. Why did these struggles feel so heavy? Why did it seem like you faced more inner turmoil than those around you? You looked at others and saw them moving forward with ease, forming relationships, achieving milestones, while you were still wrestling with the same doubts, the same patterns, the same invisible adversaries. It wasn't fair and it wasn't easy, but somehow, deep down, you always sensed there was a reason. You didn't know what it was, not at first. All you knew was that giving up wasn't an option, even when everything inside you screamed that it would be so much easier to let go. And so, you kept going. You learned how to carry that silent burden. You learned how to draw strength from a well so deep it felt endless. But it still hurt. It still felt unfair. And it still left you wondering why you had to face it all on your own. Think of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He prayed in agony, sweating drops of blood, while his closest disciples slept. The greatest spiritual battle of his life took place in the dead of night, out of sight, beyond anyone else's understanding. In that moment, he faced the weight of the world's sins alone, preparing for what was to come. You may not have seen it at the time, but your silent battles mirrored that kind of solitary struggle. You weren't fighting for recognition or validation. You were being prepared for something greater. Just as Jesus emerged from Gethsemane ready to fulfill his purpose, your battles weren't about breaking you. They were about shaping you. That quiet, invisible war was your preparation ground. It wasn't weakness. It was sacred, hidden strength, building a foundation that no one could take away. Over time, you started to notice subtle changes. The doubts that once felt overwhelming began to quiet. The wounds that once seemed unbearable began to heal. You found moments of clarity where there had only been confusion, flashes of strength where there had been nothing but exhaustion. It wasn't a sudden transformation. It was gradual, like the first signs of spring after a long, harsh winter. Little by little, you saw yourself growing stronger. The things that used to shake you didn't have the same power anymore. The words that once cut deep now bounced off you. And the battles that once felt like endless storms became opportunities to test the strength you'd gained. You realized that every time you thought you couldn't go on, you were being fortified. The changes weren't just internal. They began to ripple outward. The way you moved, the way you spoke, the way you carried yourself, it all started to reflect the transformation happening within. This wasn't just a personal evolution. It was something much bigger. You began to sense that there were forces at work behind the scenes, orchestrating events, aligning people, and clearing paths you couldn't see before. The struggles you faced weren't random. They were intentional. They weren't there to destroy you. They were there to elevate you. As you kept pushing forward, you started noticing the synchronicities, the right message at the right time, a sudden opportunity that seemed to come out of nowhere, a person who showed up just when you needed them most. These weren't coincidences. They were signs that the spiritual realm was moving on your behalf. What once felt like punishment now felt like preparation, and what once seemed like rejection now felt like divine alignment. It's not easy to admit, but part of you resisted this change. You questioned why you had to face these battles at all. You wondered if it was worth it, if it was leading anywhere. And yet, as time went on, you began to embrace the process. You stopped seeing yourself as a victim and started seeing yourself as someone being refined. The resistance faded as you recognized the strength you'd gained. What used to feel like isolation became a time of sacred solitude. What used to feel like endless struggle became a journey of transformation. You began to accept that you were being prepared for something greater than you'd ever imagined, and that realization changed everything. It wasn't about why the battles happened, it was about who you were becoming because of them. Now, you stand in a place of empowerment. You look back at those silent battles and see them for what they were, stepping stones to your own evolution. You no longer feel the need to explain what you went through, because your growth speaks for itself. The doubts that once held you back no longer have a grip on you. The rejection that once defined you is now a distant memory. You've stepped into a new reality, one where you fully understand your strength and your purpose. You're no longer afraid to move forward. You no longer hesitate to embrace the life you were meant to live. What seemed like endless struggle was actually the foundation of your transformation. And now, you're ready to build something extraordinary on top of it. Comment, "I overcame," if this resonates with you. The battles you faced weren't just about survival. They were about shaping you into someone extraordinary. Your silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. It was power. It was preparation. And now, you stand as proof that even the fiercest storms can't break a chosen one. Comment, "Fighter," if this resonates with you. And if you feel called to go even deeper, there's a sacred space reserved for our community. A private room where you receive full prophetic messages daily. Join the Prop Heron membership through the link in the description and walk this path with us. How kindness was weaponized against you. You've probably noticed how, no matter how much you give, some people seem to always take more. You try to be patient, understanding, and compassionate because that's just who you are. You've felt the pull to help others, to heal what's broken in them, to be the person who lifts them up when no one else will. It's natural to think that this kindness is your purpose, to give endlessly because the world needs more light. But along the way, it's become exhausting, hasn't it? You've started to see that no matter how much love you pour out, there are those who never pour back. Instead, they leave you drained, questioning yourself and wondering if you're doing something wrong. You're not. You're just starting to realize that kindness, without boundaries, can be turned against you. It's not your kindness that's the problem. It's the people who have learned to exploit it. For years, you might have thought the issue was you. You may have replayed conversations in your head, thinking if you just said no more often, maybe they wouldn't have taken so much. Or maybe if you had been less trusting, you wouldn't have been manipulated. The truth is, these patterns often start early. Perhaps you were raised to believe that love meant giving until it hurt. Or maybe you watched others in your life put their needs aside for the good of the group, and you assumed that was the only way to love. But over time, you began to see that something wasn't adding up. You gave, and yet you felt emptier. You noticed that the people you helped weren't becoming better versions of themselves. Instead, they just kept taking, expecting more, pulling you into their cycles. It was heartbreaking to realize that the very quality you prided yourself on, your kindness, was being used as a weapon against you. Consider the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15. The father's kindness and forgiveness were a reflection of divine love, but that love was never forced, never manipulated. The father let the son go, allowed him to learn, and welcomed him back with open arms when the time was right. What's powerful about this story isn't just the forgiveness. It's the boundaries the father maintained. He didn't chase after the son, forcing him to return. He trusted that love, when given freely and honestly, would be enough to transform the situation. You, too, are learning that love doesn't mean losing yourself. It means being present, being patient, but also being wise. Your kindness is still a gift, but now it's tempered with discernment. It's no longer a leash that others can pull at will. It's a strength that you control. As you've grown, you've started to notice subtle shifts. You no longer say yes to everything. You no longer feel guilty for saying no when something doesn't sit right with you. And you've realized that your energy feels different when you honor your boundaries. The fatigue you once felt after every interaction has started to fade. You've begun to surround yourself with people who respect your time, your energy, and your kindness. These shifts aren't accidental. They're the result of you choosing to value yourself. It's not that you've stopped being kind. It's that you've learned to direct your kindness where it's most meaningful. It's like tending to a garden. Instead of scattering seeds everywhere, hoping they'll grow, you now carefully plant them in fertile soil. And the results are undeniable. The relationships you cultivate now feel more balanced, more genuine, more life-giving. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It took time, reflection, and the courage to make changes. You had to confront the fact that not everyone who needed you deserved you. That wasn't easy to accept because you've always wanted to believe the best in people. But recognizing the patterns of manipulation, the one-sided relationships, and the energy drains allowed you to step back and see things clearly. It wasn't about becoming selfish. It was about becoming wise. By choosing to protect your energy, you've created space for deeper, more authentic connections. The people who remain in your life now appreciate your kindness for what it is, a gift, not a tool they can use. And that shift has brought a sense of peace and empowerment you never thought possible. There's a moment when it all clicks, when you realize that the very thing that once felt like a weakness is now your greatest strength. Your kindness hasn't diminished. It's just grown stronger, sharper, more intentional. You can still love deeply, but now you love wisely. You can still give generously, but now you give from a place of abundance, not depletion. And that makes all the difference. It's as if you've taken back the reins of your own life. Instead of being at the mercy of others' needs, you're in control of where your energy flows. The best part? This transformation has allowed your true self to shine. You're no longer trying to please everyone or fix everything. Instead, you're showing up as the fullest, most authentic version of you. And the people who appreciate that, they're the ones worth keeping close. This new way of being has empowered you in ways you never imagined. By understanding how your kindness was used against you, you've taken a powerful step forward. You've reclaimed your energy, your peace, and your time. You've learned that boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges to healthier relationships and a more fulfilling life. And in doing so, you've become an example to others. You show them that it's possible to be kind and strong, loving and discerning, giving and wise. Your journey hasn't just changed you. It's inspired those around you to reevaluate their own relationships and to seek balance, respect, and authenticity. You've proven that kindness is never a weakness. It's a gift that, when wielded with wisdom, can transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone you touch. Comment kindness if this resonates with you. Your kindness was never the problem. It was always your strength. And now, with boundaries and discernment, that strength is unstoppable. You were attacked before you even knew you were powerful. It started so early that you might not have even recognized it at first. As a child, you often wondered why things seemed harder for you than for others. Why certain people seemed to single you out. Why your path seemed littered with obstacles that others didn't seem to face. Back then, you couldn't have known what was really happening. All you knew was that something about you made you stand out, and not always in a way that felt good. You felt different, maybe even isolated, and the world around you often mirrored that sense of otherness back to you in ways that hurt deeply. It wasn't just bad luck or random misfortune. It was something deeper, something spiritual. Even as a child, before you fully understood what being chosen meant, the enemy saw your light. And that light made you a target. The weight you carried didn't feel fair. You didn't understand why certain relationships, even with family members, felt so heavy. Why the people who should have been your biggest supporters seemed to bring the most pain. Friends who turned into bullies. Teachers who seemed harsher on you than anyone else. Rejection and betrayal followed you into your teen years, planting seeds of self-doubt and insecurity. You began to wonder if something was wrong with you. Was it your personality? Were you just unlucky? As much as you tried to be kind, to fit in, to do the right thing, it seemed like there was always a backlash. It's as if something unseen was working against you. And in a way, there was the forces that saw your potential before you could understand it were determined to keep you from ever stepping into it. Remember the story of Moses in Exodus 2. Even as an infant, before he had spoken a word or performed a single miracle, Moses was targeted. Pharaoh didn't know Moses' name, but he sensed that a deliverer was coming. So he ordered the death of all the male Hebrew infants, trying to prevent the rise of someone who would challenge his power. Moses survived because of divine intervention, because God's purpose was stronger than Pharaoh's fear. Similarly, your early struggles weren't random. They were an attempt to snuff out your potential before it could fully bloom. But just like Moses, your survival wasn't an accident. It was proof of the calling on your life. Even then, you were being prepared for something greater. Over time, you started to notice patterns. The same kind of betrayal kept happening, the same sort of rejection. But instead of breaking you, these experiences began to change you. Slowly, subtly, you started to grow stronger. What once brought you to tears now made you pause and think. You began to see through the deception. You recognized that the people who tried to bring you down weren't always as powerful as they seemed. You noticed moments of grace, little breakthroughs, moments of clarity, unexpected opportunities that reminded you you weren't alone. The attacks didn't stop, but something shifted within you. It was as if you were learning to navigate the storm rather than being overtaken by it. You started to feel the stirrings of purpose. By now, you understand that none of it was random. The betrayals, the rejections, the trials, they were shaping you, not destroying you. Those early attacks weren't just meant to keep you down. They were meant to keep you from realizing who you truly are. But what the enemy didn't count on was that each attack made you stronger. Each disappointment taught you something about yourself. Each struggle deepened your faith, sharpened your intuition, and strengthened your spirit. The very things meant to break you became the tools that built you. You began to see that you weren't just surviving, you were being refined. Like gold in the fire, the heat didn't destroy you. It burned away what no longer served you, revealing the strength, wisdom, and purpose that had been within you all along. Now you stand in a place of clarity that you never thought possible. You see the cycles of attack for what they were, attempts to keep you from realizing your power. And now that you know the truth, those attacks don't hold the same weight anymore. You've grown too strong to be thrown off course by the same tactics. The rejection that once crushed you now barely phases you. The manipulations that once left you doubting yourself now fall flat because you've learned to trust your own discernment. You've reached a point where you no longer need external validation. You know who you are, and you understand that the power you carry is not just for you. It's meant to uplift others, to shine a light in dark places, and to create change in ways you may not even fully realize yet. It's not easy to acknowledge that you've been under spiritual attack for so long. But now that you've faced that truth, you're free to move forward without fear. You know that the light inside you is not just a spark. It's a fire that cannot be extinguished. You see the strength you've gained, the wisdom you've earned, and the purpose that's been steadily growing within you. What the enemy tried to destroy has become your foundation. You're no longer the same person who felt lost and confused all those years ago. You're standing in the fullness of who you are, ready to step into the future with confidence and power. Comment, "I am stronger," if this resonates with you. Your journey wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The attacks you faced weren't the end of your story. They were the beginning of your rise. Being misunderstood was protection in disguise. There were times when the loneliness felt like too much to bear. When you tried to share your thoughts, your ideas, your heart, and it felt like they hit a wall of misunderstanding. No matter how carefully you chose your words, people just didn't seem to get you. They called you too emotional, too different, too intense. Over time, you may have started to believe them. You wondered if you were fundamentally flawed, if there was something wrong with the way you experienced the world. Those labels stuck to you, making you doubt the very essence of who you were. The pain of being misunderstood ran deep, because all you ever wanted was to connect, to be seen, to be heard. But what you couldn't see at the time was that every misunderstanding, every rejection, every moment of isolation was leading you somewhere higher. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared. The challenge wasn't just external, it was internal. The world's inability to understand you made you question yourself. You might have replayed conversations, second-guessed your instincts, and tried to shrink yourself to fit in. You wanted to belong so badly that you began to silence parts of yourself. But no matter how hard you tried, the disconnection remained. That deep longing to be truly known, to be accepted as you were, felt like an ache that never went away. Yet in hindsight, those painful moments were shaping you. They taught you to listen more closely to your inner voice, to trust that still, small whisper that said, "There's more to your story than they can see." Each rejection forced you inward, to a place where you had to confront your fears, your doubts, and your true self. In the midst of being misunderstood, you were discovering the foundation of your strength. In the story of Joseph from Genesis 37, we see a young man misunderstood by his own brothers. His dreams, visions of a future where he would rise, were met with ridicule and resentment. They sold him into slavery, thinking they were rid of him, but what they intended for harm, God used for good. Joseph's journey was not about instant validation. It was about preparation. Every betrayal, every false accusation, every lonely night in prison was building a man who would one day lead a nation. Like Joseph, your season of being misunderstood wasn't a detour. It was a process. The rejection wasn't a curse. It was God's way of positioning you for something greater. His protection often looks like isolation because he's not just shielding you. He's preparing you to lead, to thrive, to stand tall in your purpose. Then the shifts began. Slowly, subtly, you started to feel the change. While you may not have realized it at first, there were signs. A new clarity in your thinking, a growing strength in your spirit, moments of insight that seemed to come out of nowhere. You began to notice that the rejection you once dreaded no longer hurt as deeply. Instead of feeling cast out, you started to see it as a kind of freedom. The misunderstandings that used to confuse you now made sense. They weren't personal, they were spiritual. God was aligning you, positioning you, and refining you. People's inability to understand your journey was never about you being too much. It was about you growing into someone they weren't yet ready to understand. As you stepped back and began to see the bigger picture, you realized that the rejection was protection. Being sidelined allowed you the space to heal, to reflect, to grow stronger. It was like being in a cocoon, a safe, enclosed place where you could transform without the noise and distractions of the world. And when you emerged, you weren't the same. The wisdom you gained, the strength you developed, and the clarity you found were all gifts of that season of being misunderstood. What once felt like punishment now feels like purpose. You see now that your time alone was never wasted. It was preparation for the life you're meant to live, the impact you're meant to have. This realization brought with it a profound sense of peace. You no longer needed everyone's approval or understanding. The opinions of others lost their power over you, because you finally understood your worth was never tied to their acceptance. You found strength in the silence. You learned to trust God's timing. And you began to see that the journey you walked wasn't just for you. It was for the people you're now called to inspire. The rejection, the misunderstandings, the solitude, they weren't just about your healing. They were also about equipping you to be a beacon of hope for others who feel lost, unseen, and unloved. Your transformation has become your testimony. Now you stand in a place where your light can no longer be hidden. The very people who once couldn't understand you are beginning to notice the change. They see your strength, your confidence, your peace, and they don't know how to explain it. What they once rejected, they now respect. The same rejection that used to bring you to tears has become your crown. You carry yourself differently because you know that every step of the journey had a purpose. Your silence, your solitude, and your misunderstandings were all part of God's design to shape you into someone who can stand strong, even when others can't see the full picture. Comment, "I am seen," if this resonates with you. Your story wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Being misunderstood wasn't the end of your journey. It was the beginning of your transformation. This is the shock, you made it. When you think back on everything you've endured, it can feel surreal. There were days you weren't sure you'd make it through, times when the weight of everything threatened to crush you. The rejection, the isolation, the betrayals, it felt endless. But now, here you are, standing in a place you never thought possible. The very fact that you've come this far is the shock, not only to those who doubted you, but also to the parts of yourself that once did. Every painful moment that seemed designed to break you instead became a building block for your resilience. And now, as you look around, you realize that you've become someone they can no longer overlook, someone who stands out not because of what you've said, but because of what you've survived. It wasn't easy to get to this point. The journey you walked was full of dark valleys, moments when it seemed like the light at the end of the tunnel might never come. You fought battles that no one else saw, battles that didn't just test your faith, they redefined it. Those close to you often misunderstood the depths of your struggle. They mistook your silence for surrender, your pain for weakness, your perseverance for stubbornness. But they never truly understood the spiritual warfare happening within you. Each step you took was harder than the last, and each step you took alone. You wanted someone to see, to understand, to tell you it was going to be okay. But those words never came. Instead, you found that strength within yourself, even when it felt like you had nothing left to give. And then something shifted. The darkest nights brought clarity. The betrayals turned into lessons, the silence into reflection. God was working behind the scenes, even when you couldn't feel it. In the story of Esther, her rise to queenship came after a season of hidden preparation. She didn't see the full plan at the time, but her struggles positioned her for a purpose far greater than she could have imagined. Similarly, your setbacks were never just setbacks. They were setups for transformation, for elevation. You began to understand that your journey wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about fulfilling a divine purpose that had been placed within you all along. The signs of change became undeniable. The people who once doubted you began to see the strength in your silence, the resolve in your stillness. Your presence alone started to speak louder than any argument ever could. Those who once thought they had you figured out now found themselves questioning everything. They had only seen the surface, never realizing the depth of what you were going through. You weren't just recovering from the pain, you were rising above it. The transformation wasn't just internal anymore. It was evident in how you carried yourself, how you spoke, how you moved through the world. The very things they thought would break you had become your greatest sources of strength. What they failed to realize was that your journey was never about their approval. The people who doubted you, who turned their backs, who whispered behind closed doors, they weren't the ones writing your story. That's why their disbelief no longer matters. This was never about them. This was about God's plan for your life, about the divine mission you were always meant to fulfill. Every obstacle, every attack, every moment of silence was part of a larger tapestry being woven by hands much greater than theirs. While they focused on your setbacks, God was preparing your comeback. And now that it's here, their opinions can't hold a candle to the light you carry. But this isn't just about what others think. It's about who you've become. You've discovered a strength you never knew you had, a clarity you didn't know was possible. You've learned to trust yourself, to trust God's timing, to trust the process. The doubt that once plagued you has turned into unshakable confidence. You're no longer concerned with proving them wrong. You're focused on proving yourself right. And in doing so, you've become an example to those still in the dark. They see your resilience, your strength, your light, and it gives them hope. It shows them that it's possible to survive the impossible, to overcome the unthinkable, to rise from the ashes and shine brighter than ever before. Now, as you stand on the other side, you realize this isn't the end. It's the beginning of something much bigger. The world will see what you've become, but you'll know it's only a glimpse of what's to come. Your survival is the foundation, but the life you're building on top of it is what will truly leave them speechless. Your story is no longer a secret. It's a testament to the power of endurance, faith, and divine purpose. Chosen one, you're not here to explain how you made it. Your presence is proof. Let them talk. Your life is about to speak louder than ever. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Like this video, and comment "I am chosen" to let this message anchor in your soul. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. For full prophetic revelations daily, join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light. Let this be the moment you step boldly into the purpose you were chosen for.